I went back into the office today because my work, we are transitioning back into the office. We're doing a hybrid model, and it went so much better than I was expecting. Not because I was expecting it to go bad, but just because of my own personal anxiety around returning to the office. But once I got there, I think what like really stood out for me more than anything, it was great. Everything was smooth, no complaints. But driving back home, I couldn't stop thinking about the last 2 years and where they went. And if you were to ask me what we did in the last 2 years, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I just feel like my mind has gone completely blank.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that your return to office went back or going back, your return to office, whatever, went well. I actually was having a conversation today with somebody. We are also like gonna transition back. And I was talking to somebody today and they were like, the hardest thing for me, I realized, was actually getting my mind around going back to the office, like not even necessarily doing it, but just like getting into that mindset again.
Mhm.
Which I thought was interesting because I actually felt like we had to train our mind to stop going to the office, like when everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So it's like interesting how it's like more so like mind over matter. But other than that, I feel like it's not surprising to me that you like literally don't know what happened in the last 2 years, because same, and also nothing happened. Like literally not one thing happened. Like lots of things happened. Things
Yeah.
happened, but also nothing
Nothing.
happened.
But I feel so much older. Like I almost aged
Yeah.
double the amount than what I should have.
Well, that's like literally what people say, like stress ages you. Like stress collectively for all of us aged us. We're all tired, we're all stressed, we're all like burnt out, whether it's from working from home, whether it's still going to the office during the pandemic, whether it's transitioning into going to the office, quote unquote, post pandemic, like whatever it is. Like I also feel a lot older. Like I used to say that I didn't feel any more than like 21. Like I felt like 21 in my brain. Now I feel I honestly like I forget that I'm 26. I feel like I'm 27. Like, and my mom will always just be like, but you're only 26. Like you literally are closer to 26 than you are 27. But in my mind, I'm 27 and I've rounded that to 30. And all of a sudden I just feel so much older than, not even like necessarily in a bad way, but just in a way where I'm kind of like, what am I doing? Like, what am I
Yeah,
doing? What's going on right now?
100%. I feel the exact same way. I feel like I've been talking about turning 30 since
Yeah.
I was 25. I'm
Since
like,
you turned, yeah,
we're one year
literally.
closer. I'm 1 year freaking closer to 30. And now like I've changed my perspective on it. I can't keep
Yeah.
harping on turning 30. Age is a
Good.
gift. But I think it just I think where it's coming from is this idea that like we've lost 2 years of our lives. And
Mhm.
I'm trying not to think of it in that way, but driving back home today, that's really all I could think of, which is like, what the
Yeah.
hell did I do these last 2 years?
I know. I don't know. It's like such a weird, like, time capsule, I feel like, of time. Like, it was just a lot of stuff like compressed in like a little box that
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's like a box of time and you just like bury it and there's a before and there's an after. And I know what you mean when you say like you feel like you kind of have like lost this time, like you don't know what's happening, you feel like nothing happened, but you've just like lost 2 years. But at the same time, I feel like it taught us a lot of stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's like the most vague sentence ever. But I don't know, like I kind of look back at some of the things that I was doing like pre-pandemic or even during the pandemic, and I've made a lot of decisions over the pandemic that are vastly, vastly different
Mhm.
than I was making pre-pandemic. And it's because I was having this conversation with my mom and we were kind of talking about something else, but it relates to this in that you're just so like busy or like occupied or like running on autopilot that
Mhm.
you don't have the energy or you don't make the energy to think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas when we were all forced to completely stop and like not even necessarily reset, just like stop, and you had nothing to do, you had nothing to do but think about what you were doing or what you were going to do or how you were going to do it, because everything was challenged. It like really forced you to be like, but what am I doing? And I feel like that's part of what made me feel older,
Mhm.
is me like looking around me and being like, but what am I doing in my life? Like that sounds like so intense and like such an existential crisis, but I feel like it was like everything was like the stress of like what was happening, like not doing anything, but also doing things, and also like the most ever happening in the world.
Yeah.
And you just look around and you're like, I don't know, like what's going on?
I also think when you're talking about being on autopilot, I think for a very long time we were on fight or flight just constantly every day.
Mhm.
And uh my brain just can't register. Like I keep saying the
Yeah.
same thing, like I don't know what happened. I literally don't know what happened, but I know how difficult the pandemic obviously was for everyone, but like for us in particular, I think we also learned a lot just emotionally and how to process and how to deal
Mhm.
with people, how to deal with certain situations. And I think that's something that has probably aged us even more because we had to take on a lot more than we probably should have at the time. Again, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm being very vague, but I think that also had a lot to do with it. And I think
Yeah.
what you said about everything just being compressed in this tiny box, that is exactly what it felt like. And now I'm being asked to come out of the box and I don't want to because I
Yeah.
feel like I have PTSD and I just want to
Which
stay
is
home.
fair, which is like so fair. Like, I mean, I don't think like anyone would blame you if you said you had PTSD. Like, it was literally like a traumatizing, and still is, because I
Yeah.
know like things are opening up, like things are going back, but like we're still very much in a pandemic. Like, it's still raging. And like
Yeah.
every person I speak to is sick for potentially the second time.
Yep.
They're talking about doing a fourth shot or a second booster.
Yep.
That I'm like, it's like you're stuck. You're like, it's literally like a time capsule where you're like, I'm moving forward because everyone's like, move forward. But I'm actually also literally stuck because the pandemic is still happening. So just kidding. I'm gonna stay right here. And I don't want this to be like another episode about the pandemic, only because it's so easy for us to do that. Not even of our own fault. It's just too easy to do that. But um one of the things that the pandemic has, I think, taught me and taught you and taught everyone is like the importance of like resting, or like taking a break, like
Mhm.
stopping, like literally like stop.
Enough.
Enough. And I feel like that's like maybe one of the reasons why you're feeling anxious. I know that's why one of the reasons I'm feeling anxious is because the idea of like going back to the pace that I was at, I'm just like, oh yeah, like I'm not gonna, like I can't do that. Like I'm not gonna be able to do that.
I agree. Yes, I totally agree. I think it is definitely going back to that pace. And I feel like we've been running this marathon. Like, okay, I look back at the pandemic and I did nothing, but I also did a lot.
Yeah.
And work was busy
Yep.
and I was burnt out. And
Yeah.
I say this knowing what a privilege it was to keep my job throughout the pandemic and have
Yeah.
a steady income, but I forgot what it was like to rest and I forgot what it was like honestly to have a life just
Yeah.
outside of my like regular everyday work, home, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that looks like going forward, especially since we're like you said, we're still we're still
We're still in this pandemic,
in this
people.
pandemic. Do you know that Quebec um brought back their mask mandates?
Yeah. I'm like not surprised. I don't know why the fuck it's being taken away in Ontario.
I don't
Like,
understand this. I don't understand this like yo-yo
I
game
think it's
thing.
stupid. It makes no sense to me because everybody's getting sick. Um, that's like a whole other situation. But one of the things that I found really interesting about like what you're talking about, like going back to sort of like quote unquote real life, although this is real life, but whatever, um, is the idea of like what that looks like is it's interesting because it's not as though relaxing is rest always. Like this is, I think, something that I may have said to you, or maybe I said it to somebody else. I don't remember, but in November of last year, I took a trip to New York, and it was like a very random sporadic trip, and like I didn't like it was literally for like a weekend. Like it was so random, but I actually felt a lot more rejuvenated, for lack of a better word, after that trip than like say had I like rested that weekend. And so it was interesting to me because I've gone on a few trips since the pandemic has ended, like quote unquote the pandemic has ended, that actually makes me feel better
Mm-hmm.
than if I were to have done like traditional things of rest, like, you know, taking it easy, like this, that. Like sometimes I find that idea of like going back, I don't even want to say going back to what life was before the pandemic, because I genuinely don't think we ever can. So as we like move forward to a hybrid model of our lives, like it's a hybrid work model, but it's a hybrid life model too.
Yeah.
It's like I'm like finding a lot of I'm finding that I'm getting like joy and like feeling better after doing some of those things that we weren't able to, that I missed. Like
Yeah.
even small things like going out to dinner, or like, you know, like hanging out with your friends inside, like going to a party, like whatever it may be. Like those things also make me feel good
Mm-hmm.
as we move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I can see why, because we spent the last 2 years
Yeah.
resting, like taking it easy, like having to be at home, and
Yeah.
completely shifting our pace.
Yeah. Which, not to say that wasn't hard. Like being at home was really hard
Yeah.
and had a lot of like difficulties, and like, you know, like it's like you said, like you feel burnt out, like you feel tired, you are dealing with like a literal global
Pandemic.
catastrophe,
Yeah.
pandemic. Like I don't know. It's like I don't know. I'm really like learning to like take it, or something that I'm trying to learn at least is like taking advantage of things.
Mm.
So right now we haven't gone back to the office yet. We're still at home, and I'm like really, really trying to take advantage of it to like the fullest extent. Um, by which I mean like like if I need to take a break in the middle of the day, I'm gonna fucking take a break in the middle of the fucking day. Like I don't care what time it is. I don't care. I'm just like, I need to just like do this. Like I'm trying to like take advantage. And do you remember one of the very first episodes that we recorded in the pandemic? And we were like, it's all going to be over soon. And then
Yeah,
you're going to wish that you had made better use of the time. Do you remember that?
I do. It's ingrained in my mind.
And first of all, it wasn't over soon. Second of all, did I make the most of it? No. Because what, make the most of like
What was
literally
there to
what?
make the most of?
Yeah. But now I'm like, things are going to start opening again. Well, they already started to open again, but like kind of in like the full force. We're going to, as like we get closer and closer to summer, things are going to keep opening up, which I'm happy about. Like I want to go to concerts. Like I want to like go out. Like I want to do those things, but I'm trying to like take as much advantage as I can of the time that I still have at home in
Mhm.
like a pseudo everything is not fully open yet situation.
I think it's so interesting how uh, yes, I know what you're saying. And aside from this, like people romanticize the past, because
Yeah.
I'm seeing online people would post things like, do you remember the beginning of the pandemic? That was a vibe. And it was like a compilation of them making that like coffee or making sourdough bread.
Like, no,
It
it wasn't a
was
vibe.
not
Like,
a
what?
vibe.
It wasn't a
It
vibe.
was not
That was
a
not the
vibe.
vibe.
Me and Tarini were like frantically texting each other,
Yeah.
like trying to make jokes out of this like horror situation. And then do you remember I like couldn't handle being in my house anymore? So I just like
Yeah.
screamed in my backyard.
I do remember that.
I'm like, I need to leave. I just need I need
I
some
need to
fresh
go.
air.
You
I
know
need to
what?
go.
I've decided it's time for me to exit.
That was not
That
a
was not a
vibe.
vibe.
That's not like that wasn't like an
That was not a vibe.
aesthetic. That was go see a therapist, go like
That was like my
figure
mental
it out.
health like
That
plummeted.
was a
Like it
crisis.
like dove into literally the like Atlantic Ocean to the
Yeah.
ground. It became a sea urchin. Like it became moss. Like it was gone. Okay, people, it did not survive.
It was not
It was not a vibe.
it was not it. I'm gonna be honest
Who
with you.
the actual F said that that's a vibe?
I'm not joking. Yeah, they were like, it was a vibe. I'm like, it's not.
It's
I'm
not, my dude. That's not it. Like, if that was the vibe now is go see a therapist. That's always the vibe.
That's always a
The
vibe.
vibe forever is go see a therapist because we all need therapy. But especially you, that person who said that that was a vibe. People died. Like, not that I need to, I'm like thinking of like Vanessa Hudgens being like, people are gonna die, but like, that's inevitable. Like, what did she say? She's like,
It's yeah, I think she literally was like, it's inevitable that people are gonna die. These celebs too, like I love when they come out. I love when like have you ever heard that? I don't know if it's a TikTok. It's like you're in a crisis. I'm on my way.
no.
It's from like this really old show about this like super nanny that comes and helps families that have like trouble with their kids. But that literally is like celebrities in times of crisis. They're like, you guys are in trouble. I'm on my way. With Gal Gadot and her Imagine video.
Oh, I literally was just
Vanessa
gonna say
Hudgens
that.
and her like live Instagram being like, it's fine, like everybody dies. I just to be a celebrity and just live this life of like ignorance is bliss is a dream. It's a freaking dream. I'd love to live that.
You're like, make me stupid. Okay,
Yeah.
talking about this, I was thinking, okay, first of all, I have so many thoughts. My main thought is that there's something in my eye, but
I don't know.
what I was gonna say is that this thought of like what you just said, like make me stupid. I was listening to a podcast and they were like talking about something completely different. They were literally talking about something unrelated, but they were like talking about being like, this podcast randomly was on motherhood. I am not a mother. I literally don't know why I was listening to this podcast. It was about new moms. I'm literally so far away from being a mom right now. It's fine. But it was good. It was actually a good freaking podcast episode because a lot of the things that they talk about are just things like with being a new mom are kind of things that you can just relate to in your life when you start new things. Anyways.
Did you relate to this episode? You're like, the episode was about relating to things in life, and I had nothing to relate to from said episode. Like, where is this going?
Related. All you need to take away is that I related, and they were basically talking about motherhood, which I do not relate to, but as a whole and in another way, I did relate. Take what you will from that. I'm not going to offer any more context to JLT, just like that. Anyways, one of the things they talk about is the pressure on moms. This episode is everywhere. This episode is nowhere and everywhere at the same time. So one of the things they talk about is like the pressure on new moms and how there's a pressure to be like the boss lady or like a boss bitch where you're like a mom and you're like working and you're like, you know, like, I don't know, like continuing to like be hot, like continuing to like have a relationship with your husband that's like still similar, and like trying to find your way and like trying to still be like a career person and still trying to take care of a baby and like just like try to do everything at the same time, and like this idea of like a boss bitch. And I was thinking about the time when we wanted to make an episode, which we still do and it will still come, on bimbofication.
Oh my God, yes.
And so when you were like, just make me stupid, it reminded me of that, because I was thinking about how that era of like, I'm a boss ass bitch. Like I'm going to do it all, and I'm going to do it all on a volume 100. I'm going to like blow the speakers. Like, let's fucking go. Like it's done. It's actually like, I'm stupid.
Yeah.
I know nothing. What the fuck
Mhm.
do you want to tell me? Okay. Whatever it is you want to tell me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did
Go for it.
not anticipate 2020 to 2022 to be the takedown of the girl boss.
But I'm so happy because honestly, I
Yeah.
couldn't keep up. Like our last
No, no, no.
episode that we put out was about the Kardashians, not being able to keep up with the Kardashians. I was not also able to keep up with
The
this
girl
boss,
boss.
the girl boss. Like, also, like, why the fuck is it called a girl boss? Like, it's just a, like, you're a boss, like, regardless. Like, if you are a boss, you're a boss, regardless of like
Your gender.
your gender. Like, also, like, when people talk about like history, there'll be like her story, like
Oh my
her.
God. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, shut
Yeah.
the fuck up. Like, that's stupid. Like, that's stupid. It's just, it's still history. Like, history isn't about like his story. It's
Yeah.
history.
You know what?
That
It's
was an
all
aside.
it was a side. It was like, like it was a side that was just as good as the main. So it's fine. Like it was like, do you remember one time we went to Denny's? Like this was
I
fucking
knew you were gonna say hash.
and you got like a side of hash browns and it came in like a full, like the man was like, these girls are gonna eat these hash browns. You had to be there, but it was hilarious.
You really had to be there because otherwise it makes no sense. But I literally think we have a
Uh,
picture of said hash browns because they were massive. It was like a plate and it was like the side was the main.
yeah.
That was the main.
Yeah, we'll make an episode about bimbofication. I really do love the rise of bimbos. And yeah, honestly, like I think that's just like what I'm aspiring to be
Yeah, me
these
too.
days. I also love, I I love people on TikTok that explain very real and serious things, like
I
bimbofied or bimbofied. I don't even know what
oh
the
yeah.
word is. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I've only seen one, but the thing that I love about so this episode originally for anybody listening
It's
was
about
supposed to be about rest. It's fucking not about rest. It started, we
Mhm.
tried. It's kind of taken a turn,
Yeah.
which is fine. It's all life. But one of the things that I find so funny about bimbofication and how it like also ties in with rest is because it's just the idea that you're not going to put energy into something that just like that's like not going to happen. Like that sounds again vague, like I've been this entire episode, but it's like you're not going to invest energy into a conversation with somebody who's like determined to misunderstand you, or like
Yeah.
you're not going to like be determined to explain yourself to someone who just already has a preset idea of like what they want to tell you or what
Yeah.
they believe, that you're like, sure, you're like, what the fuck ever, go for it. Which
Whatever.
is something like I feel like I've like we've both I feel like talked about how we do this in our like other like regular lives. Like
Yeah.
when people tell me things about myself, I'm like, sure. Like they're like, oh, how do you know French? Like, do you know French because you like lived in Montreal for 4 years? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, let's go with that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, and you were born here and da da da. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not gonna bother like not gonna bother explaining this thing to you. Like for sure, I was born here. Like it's just I literally just I'm like I don't give a fuck. This isn't gonna ameliorate or like, enhance this conversation anymore. Just believe
Yeah.
whatever you fucking want.
Yeah. Bimbification is all about context, like
Yeah,
knowing your audience. It's actually a very clever tactic. Like
it really
on
is.
the surface level, you're coming off as stupid, but you're actually very intelligent because you are, I tell you, one, are recognizing your audience. Two, you're altering the context of what you want to say to tailor your audience.
Yep.
And three, you are making them believe that you are something else. So you're influencing.
Honestly, I think it's hilarious because it's like the antidote to like mansplaining. Like
Yeah.
if somebody is like mansplaining something to you, like it takes so much energy and effort to be like, no, I knew that. I said that. I whatever. But if someone's mansplaining something to you and you're like, oh my God, like really? So a funny like an aside is on my Hinge profile, which it takes this bimbofication to a whole new level. But on my Hinge profile, I actually have like they have like different prompts.
Yeah.
And one of my prompts, it's like teach me about, and I put teach me about NFTs. And then in brackets, I put half kidding. I cannot tell you the number of people that like the like thing that's like likes you, the number of people in my like likes you thing that try to tell me about fucking NFTs. I'm like, my dude, I wasn't going to accept you before, but I certainly am not going to accept you now. And they literally tell me so much about NFTs to the point that I actually know what an NFT is now. I genuinely know what an NFT is and what I would do if I had one. And I think it's fucking hilarious because, of course, they see this girl and they're like, this bitch doesn't fucking know an NFT. She's stupid.
I'm gonna tell
Like,
her.
I can tell her. Blocked, like X, like swipe left so fast.
Yeah.
But I think it's hilarious because so many people are like, NFTs are non-fungible trade. I'm like, I did ask, but I'm joking. That's why it says half kidding. There was only one guy who was like funny about it. And so I was like, oh yeah, like I'll accept you.
Yeah.
Everyone else, I was like, bitch, bye. I was like, don't actually tell me what a fucking NFT is. Like,
Don't.
I'm kidding. I'm fucking kidding.
You know what? I feel like on a Hinge profile, if I was a guy and I saw that, I mean, it's hard to say. It's really like hard to freaking say. But again, it's like knowing the context.
Yeah.
And like perfect example, I actually put on our story one time being like, seriously, what is an NFT?
Yeah.
And people actually got back to me, which is amazing. But if you're to put it on your Hinge
you.
profile and you say I'm half kidding, I would hope that someone responds with like a witty comment.
Exactly.
That's what I'm looking for.
That's why it's funny. But also if you were a guy and you were you, like of course you get it because our humor is the
It'd be
same.
amazing. I'd be freaking
You'd be hilarious. No, for sure.
The world.
But I just mean like this idea of like bimbofication is like the perfect antidote to like mansplaining because it's like, all right.
Yeah.
It's like I literally don't care and I know I'm right. It's not even like it's not even like I'm stupid. It's like I just cannot even be bothered to explain to you why you're stupid. So like go the fuck ahead. Like I'm
joking. I like how you linked it back to rest because it literally is, I think there's so many different forms of rest and it's not just necessarily like sitting around and doing nothing. Sometimes it's a mental rest and it's like picking your battles and recognizing that, like, for example, it's if we talk about bimbification, it's like I'm not gonna put my energy into this. I'm gonna give my brain a break. Whereas maybe before the pandemic or whenever, we would have probably, I don't know, felt like we needed to prove ourselves or we needed to challenge them back. And now it's like I don't care enough to do either of those things. I feel more than confident in my own capability. I don't need to explain anything to you. I also don't need to explain anything to you about where I'm from, what I'm doing, if I'm not interested in extending this conversation further.
Yeah, literally. And I think like the idea of rest is something that has grown and changed so much over the pandemic because I think when the pandemic started, everyone was like, oh my God, I'm going to be home for like 2 weeks. Like amazing. I'm going to like be able to work from home for 2 weeks. Like I'm not going to have to do anything. Like I'm not missing out on anything. I can rest. And at the beginning of the pandemic, the idea of rest was very typical. It was our typical idea of rest of like, I'm gonna like stay at home and I'm gonna like hang out and I'm gonna do like traditional ideas of self-care of like, you know, like rest and take a bath and journal. And those things are still entirely valid and count as rest. But as the pandemic continued, I learned at least that rest just means whatever makes you feel better and rejuvenated and like as if you're like refreshed. And I think so many different things over the pandemic taught me what rest is. Like I find rest through creative outlets. I get rest when I literally rest. I get rest when I exercise. I get rest when I, you know, hang out with my friends. I get rest when I talk to people. Like there's just so many definitions of rest. I get rest when I don't fucking have to explain myself to you and I'm stupid and I'm like, sure. You think whatever you think about me, by all means, doesn't fucking matter. Like those are all different forms of rest that I don't think I would have learned about or, you know, brought to the forefront of what it means for me to rest. Like I wouldn't have had to explore those things if it weren't for the pandemic.